Let me also bring in now Derek B. Miller, author and director, The Policy Lab, who's joining us live in the broadcast as well. Thank you for being with us today on NewsX. Derek Miller, how do you react to this hypocrisy that many would point out vis-a-vis the US? This mirror that many want to show to the United States of America, and its double speak, where we have had in the past the US invade Iraq on flimsy and false reasons. So can the US really preach to others on conflict?
Well, I think this issue of preaching and tone is a different matter than the substance. The preaching and tone is inappropriate, and it's not really a matter for professionals in international diplomacy to conduct themselves that way. So that's one matter aside. But there's the parallel that's being drawn between 2003 and now, I think, might be a bit misplaced. And I think the emphasis is what I would put is here. Back in 2003, the way that we in the United States were deceived and the way that we were affected was at a profound institutional level. That is to say, the various instruments of government that work together in an ideal sense. This doesn't happen all the time, but in an ideal sense, the State Department, CIA, the embassies, the think tanks, the university professors, the specialty desks at various of our departments, they come together and they help provide and structure policy. And back then, what happened was a profound failure of those structures to work together. And also, as you pointed out, there was deception built into it. Colin Powell was caught off guard, as we understand it subsequently, not at the time, of course. And he regretted what he did when he found out later and what happened. This was a man of profound service and honor prior to that moment. Today, that is not taking place. The Trump administration has thrown these people out. So we're not talking about a betrayal of an overall system. We're talking about a new kind of decision-making that's taking place in Washington, which is, if it's not an evidence-based policy and it's not deliberative, it seems to be some kind of instinct-based decision-making. So what we're quick to call hypocrisy,
yes.
It seems to be more individual-driven than that. It doesn't feel like it's an institutional act rather than a personal one.
Do you believe then it's pretty unfortunate to try and blame India for a conflict that we never started, and we've actually advocated for peace? Do you also believe that it's pretty unfair to have secondary sanctions on India when there aren't any sanctions on the biggest buyers of Russian oil, China in particular, and Turkey as well, like a previous speaker just said?
Yeah, the war is Russia's fault. That's the full sentence, and that is the fact of the matter. But what Doug said was absolutely right. The sanctions, any kind of tariffs on India regarding this is really, it's counterproductive, it's pointless, and it seems to be what feels like a rather childish act, but again, not one that seems to be structured by institutional will, but rather by personal instinct. And so it's, again, I think the word hypocrisy is a large one, and it seems to situate it in this wider geostrategic geostrategy, but it doesn't feel to me that that's what's going on. It feels like the White House at this moment is making decisions at this moment. And no, it's not useful or productive. And of course, India has always been deft, and I don't mean recently, I'm talking since the Arthashastra, of being able to balance its position, find its autonomy, constantly watch out for foreign influence, and maneuver carefully among other major powers around it. And we are seeing right now the same action by India, which demonstrates to me a continuity, not a contradiction, in India's policy and relation, which is why we see the move towards Russia.
Okay, let me in fact also ask you now, Derek, about US-India relations. Do you believe it's pretty unfortunate the way US-India relations have taken a turn for the worse? Are you disappointed with how the US, through this new stance, is treating a steadfast ally and friend?
Well, of course. I mean, listen, the U.S.-India relationship has always been challenging, but India's relationship with China and Russia has been challenging, and it's the nature of the beast. But what's happening now is that the U.S. is not creating the space for the growing positive relationship that we should have with India in order to stabilize relations, not with India, but rather through India's influence in the areas around it. And is, of course, unfortunate, but I also think it's quite temporal. We're all going to be here for a long time. And what we're going through is a bump. And I hope that wiser voices start entering the deliberative process. And those instruments of government hopefully can start coming back in, even though many of the best people have either been fired or have left.
Okay. Let me also ask you, Derek, about then what is needed to reset the India-US relationship in the days ahead.
Goodwill and professionalism.
Okay, that's a pretty blunt answer there, but a true one. Derek, also, as far as the U.S. is concerned, are you wary that the tariff stance, and the recent statements could jeopardize a lot of relations of the U.S. with other countries? There could be new relations forming in the days ahead across the world.
New relations are forming, I think, not so much because of the tariffs, although, yes, of course, you're absolutely right, that is happening right now. But the longer issue is how stable is the U.S. as a partner in commerce and diplomacy? How steadfast is it to its allies? And these are questions that actors, for example, those within NATO, have not asked themselves in the past in the way that Trump is forcing them to ask themselves presently. That does not mean it's a weakening of the alliance, but it does mean that when you start asking certain kinds of questions, it begins to change the conversation agenda and the presumptions that organize and animate action there. I think that in the long term, we might see, we're hopefully going to see a return of that, forgive me for repeating myself, but the higher levels of professionalism one would expect from the United States,
Okay.
whereby even when you disagree, you at least understand how and why it is those decisions were made,
Okay.
and you're dealing with people who are serious in order to be able to make adjustments and corrections along the way.